no more. I am delivered. I don't like men no more. I said I like women. Women.
That was a funny one, right?
That's a classic.
Should we be offended that you saved the gay video for me and Nick to come on?
Well, Jason, I'm not even kidding. I was gonna wait, like play it later on and be like, well, Jason, we have some good news about Jason tonight. But I made Rob load a couple of videos in here because I don't know how to share my screen. So I'm like, Rob, you have to load videos into the thing for me. So I got this one too. That kid rules, man. I love that kid. All right, let's see what's going on here. All right, so now I'm back in the live chat. Guys, I'm hoping you guys all like have patience with us tonight because Rob really is my tech guy. And like I usually send him 10 or 12 videos that we're going to go through tonight. And we really don't have any of those abilities. So Jason is going to be the tech guy tonight.
Sort of.
Jason's going to attempt to share the screen when we need the screen.
Well, you gave me 30-second notice. So
well, you know what it is? We were going to have Nick do it because Nick's Gen Z, and we're like, we'll let the young kid do it because he'll figure it out. And apparently Nick doesn't have a clue how to work a computer, so that's how this is gonna go.
These things that are behind me, most Gen Zers don't look at anymore, and so that gives you a sign. I don't know anything.
Yeah, they're real bugs, real life bugs. I actually wanted to get you guys on. So okay, so here's what happened. I knew Rob was going to be out for 2 episodes, so I'm like, all right, I'm going to get Jason on 1 episode. I'll get Enoch on 1 episode. Enoch, I had on first. So Enoch calls me and he's like, yo, I got 7 show ideas, and he's like, we could do a bracket where we find like the best Catholic YouTubers or whatever. He's like, we could do something about the kid. He gives me like 7 ideas. I'm like, let's go with the bracket thing. We'll do that. That'll be a good show. Great. Jason, all week I'm texting him. I'm like, Jason, what if we did like movies that it's okay for men to cry to? Yeah. I'm like, he goes, I don't cry.
No, I said it makes it sound so worse than it is.
So then I'm like, all right, Jason, how about if we do like converting under Francis, converting to Catholicism under Francis? He goes, it's fine. I'm like, Jason, you're not giving me anything here. What are we gonna
it's fine was a joke because you've always asked me in the past, hey, can you come on trivia? Or, hey, can you come on here? And I'm like, we'll see. We'll see. He's like, I need to know now. And I'm like, okay, I'll let you know later.
Jason loves to like break my chops to the point where I want to throw my phone at the wall. So, but I honestly, both of you did convert under Francis, right?
2018 for me. I don't know when Nick's was.
Actually, it's a little bit providential. Today, on the exact day, 4 years ago, I converted.
Get out of here.
So yeah, 4 years
like
ago.
You came into the church 4 years ago to the day?
4 years ago to the day.
So I know, Nick, you did a show on Matt Fradd. Like you were on Matt Fradd's show. You did Pints with Aquinas. And you were on with like 2 other guys, right?
Yeah, I was on with 2 other friends. There was actually a group of 4 of us 4 of us friends that converted. And so it ended up being 3 of us that went on his show to talk about it.
So you had a group of 4 guys that you were friends with, and all of you basically studied your way into the church?
More or less. It originally started as a Bible study with 2 primary goals. The first goal being to combat sin in our personal lives, because at the time we were all, freshmen, sophomore, and undergrad in college. And so trying to figure out like how you navigate secular university while being also, striving for holiness. But then also at the same time, we also wanted to know the truth because we didn't feel that any of the Protestant sects that were talking to us or preaching to us had the truth. And most of those Protestant sects were kind of like, your praise banner, rock and roll style, non-denominational churches. And so we never felt like they were actually giving us any substance. And so I, being the history nerd, kind of ended up being the catalyst of saying, okay, I've studied theology most of my life in bits and pieces, but I want to go back and say, what did the early church believe in? And that was the catalyst that eventually, got us studying all these various subjects. And then lo and behold, we all end up converting. And all of us came from fairly anti-Catholic backgrounds. So it is quite a miracle.
All right, I'm gonna dig into that a little because Jason, I'll get to you in a second. But are you still friends with those guys? Do you guys still talk? What's the situation?
Yeah, so two of them are actually in seminary, a diocesan seminary, to be priests, and so it's pretty cool. And then the third, he is one of the most, like, I would say, artistically brilliant individuals I've ever met. Artistic in the context of like computer and photography work, and so he actually went ahead and He moved across the country, but he actually works for his fraternity, his like larger college fraternity. He got a degree in basically anything you could think of that has to do with video editing and stuff like that. And he does fantastic work. And so all of them are continuing in faith. And so we all keep in contact as much as you can, being split up across the country, and also having full-time lives, if you will, whether that be jobs or school. But yeah, we keep in touch. It's all good.
So okay. So now you guys all sit and you guys decide to get into a Bible study, and you're trying to combat sin and all this. Now, what is the first domino that you're like, uh-oh, this is a little too Catholic? What's going on here? Like, is it a church father? What was it?
Yeah, so it was interesting. So my background, just for the viewers to know, I was originally, I always debate, am I a convert or am I a revert? Because I was technically baptized in the Catholic Church at 6 months old. But at 6 months, my mom, which wasn't Catholic at all, and my dad, who was very much so just a cultural Catholic, they just started going to the world of non-denominationalism. And so practically speaking, for 19 to 20 years of my life, that was all I knew. But when I say that's all I knew, it was in the practical sense, because I was actually studying all different forms of theology from a very young age. And I mean like 6 or 7, starting to get into being like, oh, what does the Bible say about this? What does the Bible say about that? And so by the time I was actually 2021, I was very much so what you would just call a fundagelical, right? Pretty fundamentalist.
It's a good term. I like that.
Right? Pretty anti-Catholic. And when I say anti-Catholic, I mean, not just the classics like the Pope is the Antichrist, but the See of Rome itself is the Antichrist, going back persecuting Christians throughout all eternity, if you will. And that, Mary and the saints, it's idol worship, et cetera, or vain repetitions, right? Which you'll see a little bit later in this video as you're going to pull up one of these clips.
Yeah, well, wait, real quick, because that's kind of why I'm asking this background. Because Jason, you come from Church of Christ. Like I'm gonna ask you both a little bit of background, and then we're gonna dive into, just to give everybody a heads up of where we're going. We're going to dive into that kid going into the Catholic Church with the rosary thing. Amy, we're also going to discuss this tonight, the disgusting news with the Dodgers. We're also going to discuss the incorruptible nun, but I'm just asking everybody to bear with me while I just kind of set the stage, because Nick and Jason both have very interesting background stories of how they came into the church. So you're coming from this anti-Catholic background, thinking the See of Rome itself has been persecuting Christians throughout all of Christian history.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the first major domino to hit was not so much anything intellectual, but was something very personal. And when I say personal, it could come off to the ears of some as very subjective, but I'll tell you why it's not. I was hyper, and I mean hyper scrupulous at the time of my conversion. And when I say hyper scrupulous, I mean my particular brand of fundamentalism had a very Calvinistic flair, but a Calvinistic flair in the true sense of it being double predestination. So God electing some for heaven and actively willing damnation for others. And so I actually believed, and think of how bad this is, I actually believed for quite a long time that any action, right, that a person commits who is not saved, right, a person commits who's not saved, is a sin. So whether that be, them just waking up in the morning, brushing their teeth, putting their shoes on, if you're not in grace, right, sovereign grace, then it's just sin. And I was struggling to know whether or not I was truly saved or not. And what was the catalyst for me was actually a friend of mine inviting me to go to Mass, and me resisting it so much, but then just out of courtesy deciding to go. And the catalyst was the gospel for that day was the story of the prodigal son. And it hit me like a freight train, in the sense that I just felt very much so the Lord saying, it's time to come home to your father. And I was like, very, very torn up about it. But I said, okay, Catholicism is true. If I'm going to hear this case, I am going to list out every single possible objection I can possibly think of, and I can think of a lot, and I'm going to go one by one through them and ask 2 questions. 1, can I find this in Scripture? 2, is this what the supposed early church believes? And it was essentially, long story short, issue by issue, getting knocked off to where I eventually got to the point recognizing that Catholicism was at least 1% true, and it scared me so much that I ended up being so nervous that I was actually like going against God's religion my entire life, that I didn't eat for 3 days. And it wasn't me fasting and prayer. It was just food was repulsive to my senses because I was so terrified that I had been fighting against God's religion, calling it the Antichrist's faith my entire life. And
talk about fear of God.
Yeah.
Right?
It was
like,
insane.
holy cow, but what an amazing moment of grace. Like that, like I know you're fearful, but like that God even put it, like, so many people would have resisted so hard at that moment, but you just see this chasm of God's grace coming into your heart at this moment. And so you don't eat for 3 days. You're terrified now. What changes there?
Yeah, so there was 2 things that really changed it. So one was very practical, and then the one was very mystical. So the practical thing is I had by this time gotten intellectually convinced of Catholicism, but I was just still like, trying to find some excuse somewhere, trying to find, is there one early church father that says that baptism is just a symbol? Is it anywhere out there? Can I possibly find my Baptist faith, if you will? And I had read through in my intellectual journey the Roman Catechism, the Catechism of the Council of Trent, because I, as a theology nerd, already knew about V2 and what we in the Protestant world called the real Catholics versus the new Catholics. That was actually
wait a minute. Are you serious? So I've never met a Protestant that even understood that there was a Vatican II, and it's like, as a Catholic, I did not know this until. I mean, I was raised in a very Catholic home. I have 8 siblings. I went to the new Mass growing up my whole life. I didn't know the traditional Latin Mass existed until Summorum Pontificum.
Oh, really?
So, like, this is so crazy to me that you actually, oh, sorry, I hit that on accident. But okay, so you as a Protestant understood there were real Catholics and these new Catholics, like this difference.
Yeah. We would say I actually heard it echoed by a Protestant pastor not too long ago online, where he said, like, we can debate, and this is what I would have called him at the time too. We can intellectually have honest and rigorous debates with the Tridentine Catholics, but the new Catholics don't believe in anything.
That's James White. James White said that, right?
James White and what's his name? Pastor
Durbin.
Doug Wilson. Pastor Doug Wilson up in the same general crowd, right? What you call like neo and old school Calvinists. So I had gone to, in total, 3 new masses right after I had read the Catechism of the Council of Trent. And I basically, by the 3rd time I went, remember praying, and I said, Lord, I know that this church believes that you are present in the Eucharist, and I believed that, this is a symbol my entire life. But I don't think anybody in here believes that you're in the Eucharist. Because I had came from, if you think about it, I'm old school conservative Protestant, Bible carrying, suit wearing, hard preaching, etc. And then you go and, classic hymn singing and things like that, congregational singing. You get used to the preacher where you say, I want a hair-legged, fire-breathing preacher banging on the pulpit. And then you show up at the new Mass and you're just like, what is all this hand-holding? And everyone's wearing highly scandalous clothing. Yeah. And I'm seeing them have communion in the hand and all these types of things. And so I was just like, I don't know if I can convert. I literally was that scandalized. I said, I don't know if I can truly convert, because what's the point of believing in that which is quote unquote correct, or at least I'm seeing this as correct, but then practically speaking, it's not lived out. So I looked up, because I knew about this again. I looked up Latin Mass in my area, right? And again, this is like a few months into looking into Catholicism. And I found where I go currently to Mass, a high Latin Mass. It was a Requiem Mass at 7:30 in the morning on All Souls Day. I show up, sit in the very back row, and it ended up being like the 1605 polyphonic, like Queen Victoria edition.
Holy cow.
And I was just blown away. I remember when the Scola started, I remember saying to my dad, this has to be a recording. There's absolutely no way people sound this good. Like, it was just insane. And what was so beautiful is I saw finally.
Wait a minute. I gotta stop you. Your dad is with you?
Yeah, I took my dad along. I was like, you want to just come along and experience this with me?
Now your dad was a cultural Catholic, then goes evangelical, raises you evangelical, and you drag him to a Latin high mass. Mm-hmm. What are your parents thinking during this whole conversion phase?
So I was so nervous, not gonna lie, about the potential conversion phase, because I honestly thought, I knew my dad is a very like phlegmatic kind of chill guy. So I thought that at the most he would just basically be like, well, as long as you're following Christ, it's good enough. Very kind of cultural indifferentism, if you will. My mom, I had no clue, because she was brought up in like that old school missionary Baptist world. And I remember from like the age 6, 7, 9, hearing my mom saying things like, the Catholic Church has the blood of millions on their hands, hearing stuff like that. And so I was like, oh no, they're going to flip. And so I remember just taking my dad, and he was just like, yeah, this was very pretty. He kind of thought of almost like a symphony experience for him.
Yeah.
But the way he looked at it, he was just like, this is their way of worshiping God, and that's beautiful. Well, fast forward, what ended up happening is that in that mass, I finally saw all of the faith that I had been reading about come visibly now in the room. You saw both the theology and the prayer become so distinct. And what was crazy is that I went back. I had to keep going back. I just kept going back. And
you can't receive yet.
No, yeah, I knew that. I couldn't receive yet. And it was so hard, because I was just like, this is absolutely insane. And so the last thing is that what finally pushed me over the edge was, I was there intellectually. The mass, it was definitely drawing me more and more. But the last thing that ended up happening was
Enoch. Okay, he is the funniest human being on the planet. I hate his guts. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. It was just funny.
I'd like to meet Enoch one day. He seems like
you're gonna do a get to know. I'm setting you two up for a get to know, because first off, Nick, I heard your conversion story on Frad's channel, but because there was 3 of you, I didn't get to hear all of this. Like, this is like, I can't believe all this. And then we're going to get to Jason's next. So I know Jason's sitting there. I feel bad that he's just sitting there silently, but this is insane. So, all right. So
I'm used to sitting in silence. Don't worry.
Yeah. All right. So pick back up. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. I was there intellectually. I basically every single argument that I had in that long list was checked off, because my faith had been completely wrecked by the early fathers. Yeah. They completely destroyed my faith. And I was now believing in something very different, something very ancient, very beautiful. And then I was also going to a mass that was very ancient, very beautiful. But there was still that last little, if you will, emotional holdout, right, that was inside of me. And I remember one day this was a long time ago, but I was working at a grocery store at the time, and I decided to volunteer and pick up a couple extra hours. And this happened to be the day after Thanksgiving. And where I was at the time, it was extremely cold. It was extremely wet. It was raining outside, and I was pushing carts in the rain. And this was at 5 a.m. all by myself out in this massive parking lot. And I just break down crying, because all these debates and all these what ifs are raging in my head, because it's on the one hand, I see all of my intellectual questions being answered. But on the other hand, I have this practical, life that I've lived that says, if you become Catholic, you will not be saved, and wow, you will go to hell, because you are going to be essentially following the Antichrist team. And this just battles pulling back and forth. So finally, I say to myself, and again, this may sound very subjective. I'm not saying this is an absolute objective if you're learning about Catholicism. This is just my personal experience, what I'm about to say. I remember in that moment finally just saying, okay, if anyone knows whether or not Catholicism is true, it's going to be this one linchpin. It has to be Mary. It has to be Mary. Mm-hmm. And so I remember in the parking lot, my emotions feeling like an absolute hurricane, just going everywhere. And me for the first time just saying, Mary, I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if God is going to be angry at me for praying this. I don't know if you're going to be mad at me for praying this, but I don't know what to do. I am torn between these two completely polar opposite sides. Show me what the truth is. And in that moment, it was insane. It was one of the most insane spiritual experiences I've ever experienced. And I'm not a charismatic at all, right? I just was baptized in this insane supernatural peace. And I knew that Mary had answered my prayer. And I knew in that, and I had the grace in that moment to say, okay, I'm going to become Catholic. So when I went home, I got on the phone. My parents were gone at the time. And of all the cities that they were in traveling, it was Rome. And
holy cow.
And I'm like, Mom, Dad, I don't know what you're going to say, but I'm going to become Catholic. And like, I know, I love you. I know you guys love me, but this is just the conviction that I've been led to. And surprisingly, they were both completely fine with it. And it's been 4 years, but what has transpired is that I have brought them now probably 20 times to the Latin Mass. And they've gone from being, somewhat anti-Catholic to now my Protestant mom asking me, hey, when are you going to adoration? I'd love to go with you.
No way. Nick, okay, I have to add a few things here. First off, you are one of my favorite, like, I love the way your mind works, right? Like, when I listen to you on Meaning of Catholic, like, I watch the way, like, they'll come up with a topic, and I watch the way you study things and lay them out in such a phenomenal intellectual fashion. Like, I have never been so blown away by such like an intellect like yours. Like, I totally understand why your channel is the traditional Thomist. Like, you really do think like a Thomist. All of that, like, I've never heard such an interesting conversion story, and I've heard 100 conversion stories. That is such an amazing thing. And to see that your parents are actually starting to soften their hearts to it, and that your mother would want to go to adoration, because really the central question is, if Jesus is present in that Eucharist, it's like, how can you? It's the pearl of great price. Like, how can you not? And now I know, Jason's story I know is coming from a totally different perspective, because Jason's was mainly about authority, right? Jason, like, you really did struggle with authority.
Well, partly, but Nick reminded me when he told his parents, when I told my grandmother, who I grew up with my grandparents, for people that don't know, so my grandmother was like my mother, right? When I approached her, me and my wife, that we were becoming Catholic, at first, the way I was wording it, she thought I was telling her we were getting a divorce. And I was like, no, that's not it. So she was like, oh my gosh, you made my heart drop. And I was like, well, hold that heart for a second, because this is probably about to it was just because for people that don't know, among a lot of Protestant denominations, they allow divorce and remarriage, but actually within the Churches of Christ are very, very strict on divorce and remarriage. Only death, or in cases of adultery, will they allow it. But you should have let me go first, because mine's going to pale in comparison to his. No, so the two main things that I always say that made me start thinking about Catholicism was the real presence of the Eucharist, and also authority, right? So growing up, we within the Churches of Christ, you take communion weekly, and it's symbolic. However, we did believe it was required, because going back to that ancient church, we're trying to mimic, or they were trying to mimic what they read in the Bible and the way they understood in the ancient church. So that's why, for instance, they don't have instrumental musics, because there's no example, there's no command or necessary inference to use instrumental music, right? So Churches of Christ, a lot the more conservative ones, won't use instrumental music. They won't have kitchens. They won't allow you to eat in the churches. They usually don't even allow you to have weddings or funerals, because they don't believe the church building should be used for those purposes. There's no authority for it, right? So I grew up in a background where it was really hammered into you that you have to have the authority to do the things that you do, right? So I remember years growing up, going back to my point of the communion, was because when I would help as a young kid, as a teenager, and even into adulthood, serve the Lord's Supper to the congregation, sometimes you were tasked to say the prayer for the bread and for the wine, right? And almost everybody would always say these are emblems, or this is symbolic of, your blood shed on the cross. But I always struggled with that, because when I would read the Bread of Life discourse, those weren't Jesus's words, right? Jesus didn't say this is a symbol, this is an emblem of my body. He didn't say that there or at the Last Supper. And I used to talk to my grandma about it, and she actually had a hard time with that as well. And her response to me was always, I don't know how, but I think it's more than just symbolic. There's some type of spiritual communion or something like that, because Jesus doesn't say that. So when I would lead prayers, I would say, this is Christ's body, or this is or however I would word it, right? And you would have people come up to you sometimes and go, Jason, you got to be careful saying that, because it kind of sounds Catholic when you're saying that, because we don't really believe that this is really his body and blood, right? And my response was, I'm just quoting Jesus verbatim. I mean, that's all I'm doing.
I'm quoting scripture.
Yeah. So as I got older, I really, like I said, I already had authority in my mind. And so then I struggled with this for years. Well, probably about a year before I actually started RCIA, and when I moved to Texas, we were living in Wyoming. I had reached out to one of the churches there, and actually was supposed to meet with the priest to start RCIA and all that, but I kind of blew it off and never went. And funny story is, during that same time period, I actually had a scheduled vasectomy, because we had just had our 4th kid. I was going to go get a vasectomy. And me and my wife, we went to go visit Mount Rushmore. And on the way back, I was like, the main reason is because I was like, dude, I'm kind of scared to go into the needle, do all this stuff. And everybody kept saying it's not that big of a deal. But if I'm honest, I was kind of nervous about it. So I called the doctor as we were driving back, and I told him, I said, look, I'm going to have to reschedule. I'm not ready for this right now. And either that night or the next night or whenever, my wife had asked me about it. And I said, well, you do know that the Catholics say it's a sin to get a vasectomy. And she goes, yeah, but we ain't Catholic.
How did you even know that? How did you even know that?
The reason I knew it, I think a lot of it, my knowledge of it came from anti-Catholic rhetoric, in the sense that when we would talk about the sin of Onan, it was always, well, he didn't follow through with giving his brother, offspring to carry on his lineage, right? But as you later, and I didn't find this out till I was actually studying Catholicism, when you actually find out, you know what the penalty for that was, as you read later in the Law of Moses?
Death,
the penalty,
right?
No. If you refuse, yeah, it was not a capital offense. So I started questioning in my mind. I said, well, if under the Law of Moses, when Moses gave the law, if not following through with this, like Onan didn't, got him killed, then it wasn't the fact that he didn't have children with his brother.
Oh, I see what you're
widow.
saying. It was not passing on the line. It wasn't a capital offense.
Yeah,
but
that
what
was
Onan did was a capital offense.
What Onan did. So
right.
When you really start looking at that, you're like, well, why did he die? Well, the only logical explanation was because he spilt his seed. Right. That's what the scripture says. He spilled his seed outside of her, and God struck him dead. So, I was thinking about that for, I don't know, a while. And now that we're Catholic, since I didn't get it, now we've had 2 kids since then. So,
it was a moment of grace for sure.
Yeah. I've never looked at it that way, but yeah, definitely. So then we moved back to Texas, I don't know, January of 2018. And I would drive by a Catholic church, probably 5 minutes from my house every day to go to work. And one February, I just stopped in, talked to them, started RCIA. And my wife went with me the first time. She wasn't really like vehemently opposed. Yeah, she wasn't where I was, but she was like, whatever you need to do to figure things out, I support you. But she wasn't going to the RCIA and mass with me and stuff like that, because I was missing Wednesday night Bible studies. I was missing.
You were a big part of your other church, though, right? Like, you were very active in this other church.
Not as much since I'd moved back. No.
What about your wife? Was your wife active in the church?
As much as women were allowed to be. Women in churches of Christ, women did not lead prayer. They didn't teach. They didn't. The only Bible classes they taught
they're
were
more
for little
Catholic
children
than the new Catholic.
Yeah. So there's a coming home. There's a coming home episode where they have 3 or 4 former Church of Christ converts on the show, and one of them actually became a Catholic priest, and he said that he believes it's harder for Church of Christ people to convert to Catholicism because they're closer to the truth than many other Protestant denominations. They believe in the necessity of baptism. They believe in the importance of, at least receiving Holy Communion, weekly. They reject once saved, always saved, faith alone. They don't believe in any of that. The list goes on. So like a lot of their fundamental beliefs, they're very close to what Catholics believe.
Yeah.
So then I just started looking at, I'm trying to remember here, authority. I had missed a lot of, church services over there. And then when my wife finally came around to it, and I'd never pushed it on my wife, right? Like I would talk to her about it, and from the books or talks that I would listen to, and then she would ask questions. And probably July of that year, she started RCIA with me, and I was going out of town for work, and it was like 8 or 9 p.m. And when my wife, it was on a Wednesday, and when my wife had told some of her friends that why she wasn't at Wednesday night Bible study, they came over that night, like immediately as I'm trying to leave, because the church, if you're in the Church of Christ, you believe
that's the real church.
That's the real church. And if you're not a member of that church, you are damning yourself to hell. Now, you talk to the older generations, they will say that. The younger generations won't say it explicitly like that, but ultimately, that's what they believe. Mm-hmm. So my wife was kind of freaking out about it there. I'm trying to remember if there's any other major points. Like I said, mine is nothing compared to Nick's.
I mean, listen, it's an act of God moving your heart and bringing you to the truth of the Catholic faith.
So Nick said he went line by line, intellectually of all his objections to it, and that's not how I worked, right? Like once I came around to accepting the authority of the church, and I was still in RCIA when I did this, and everything, there were some things that I still struggled with, like Holy Eucharist, how for a millennia they only the laity would only receive the host, right? And the church teaches Christ is fully present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the smallest particle of the host, right? But when I would read scripture, I would read Jesus gave them bread and wine and all that. So I would see an example. So that was something I struggled with. And even after I had already accepted that teaching of the church, for a while, months up leading to confirmation, being accepted into the church, I still struggled with that. But I said, you know what? If I accept the authority of the church, which I've already acknowledged that I do, then just because I don't fully understand this right now, I will defer my judgment to the churches, and hopefully one day God will bring me. And now I have no issue with it, but it's like at some point you just got to rely on the grace of God, that I may not understand something, but that doesn't mean that I have the right to reject it. Right. Mm-hmm. And, so I accepted several things on that. And I do remember Tim Staples has a book called Behold Thy Mother. I was flying to Bakersfield, California, and I was reading that book. I was about halfway through. And I was reading it, and out of nowhere, I said out loud, I said, Mary is my mother. Like, just because I can't remember exactly what it was, but I had read something in that book that at that point, it convinced me, and I've never had another issue. Like, I didn't have issues with Mary as a mother of God, the dogmas, because the very first RCIA class I went to was on Mary and dogmas. And I was actually my very first RCIA, I'm sitting in this class with like 20, 30 other people, and I'm defending the title Mary, Mother of God, to other potential converts because I was like, to me, it was just a logical conclusion. If I believe Jesus is God and Mary is his mother, well, she's the mother of God, right? So, you know,
so in that moment on that plane, you basically you fell in love with her as your mother.
Yeah, I was at that point. I had no issue, and you know, I had you know, my friend Heath, who we've had on our show, and he's been on Trivia. The way that I met him was because I emailed the RCIA director and I said, hey, do you have anybody that has a similar background I can talk to? Because there wasn't a whole lot that were converting that I knew. And so she put me in contact with him. He actually helped me out a lot on the intellectual side because he's very smart. 2018 on Feast of Christ the King and you know, the new calendar is when we were confirmed in the church. And unlike Nick, I didn't actually know there was a difference between that there was a Vatican II, you know, that the Mass had changed. So when I first started going to Mass, it was very strange, foreign, and uncomfortable to me because you got to remember, I come from a church where you sing 5 songs a cappella, preacher gets up, he talks, you come down, you sing 1 or 2 more songs, you have a few prayers at the, you know, beginning, middle, and end, and that's your service, right? So it was very foreign. I remember I would see other or other groups like your Anglicans and stuff like that, and I would see their services, and I would think, oh, that's they broke off from the Catholics because look, they're copying the Catholic Mass, right? In RCIA, one of the teachers had basically told us that there was no really after Vatican. Somebody brought it up. The only thing after Vatican II was they just took out a lot of the unnecessary things, the repetitive things, and made it simpler and put it in the vernacular for people. So that's what I believed. And then I listened to Taylor Marshall. I found an FSSP Paris. I was like, I want to check. He's talking about the Latin Mass. What the heck is this? So then I went to it, and it was at that point, much like Nick, that I was like, this is the faith I've been studying because you can ask my wife. One of my complaints to her going into the church was I would tell her verbatim, this seems very watered down, like from the truth. Everybody's wishy-washy. Like I even had a debate with one of the teachers in RCIA because he was telling us basically, you know, it doesn't really matter if you convert. You know, you don't have to be Catholic to be saved, and this and that. And they were going on about Billy Graham, who I'm not a fan of Billy Graham, never have been, right? And I spoke up and I was like, if it doesn't matter, then why are any of us here? I said, why am I uprooting me, my wife, my kids, our friends and family? Why am I disappointing family members and friends? And I have friends that don't talk to me really anymore. Why am I doing this if it doesn't matter?
Yeah.
You know, it does matter.
See, it's funny that you're both saying that though, because even for me, like I'm studying Dr. Hahn's work and I'm hearing all these things. And as a Catholic brought up in the Catholic faith, until I went to the traditional Mass, the faith that I was learning and the faith that I was practicing didn't click properly. And it was like, once I went to the traditional Mass, it all clicked together. So, all right. So now you guys are both in around about the same amount of time. What has that been like for you under Francis, Nick? How have you handled coming in under Francis? Because especially like you're saying, since the council, things have changed a lot. Like, how have you really, have you been struggling with that? Have you kind of just said, okay, you know, I just trust that God has things under control. It's still his church. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's a big question, not gonna lie. So
you don't have to say anything themselves. It's more just about how are you processing a lot of the difficulties.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So when I was in the process of converting, I remember, see, this is what was interesting. I remember, I don't even know how old I was. I'd have to do the math, but I remember actually watching the live stream of when Pope Francis was elected Pope. So I remember seeing him as a Protestant, seeing him come out on the terrace in Rome and seeing all of that. And I remember as a Protestant hearing all these things that were very odd in the media, right? Very, very early on. And so, I remember hearing the, who am I to judge comment, like very, very early on. And I remember thinking oh man, this is really, really weird. This is already starting to kind of show me that, Rome is the whore of Babylon. It's just coming out more and more, But when I came into the church, one of the major and truly stumbling blocks was, as I was researching the truth of the Catholic faith, it was the synod, the Amazonian synod was going on. And then all of a sudden on everything Catholic on media, you see Pachamama. And, I don't know what was worse, Pachamama or the people who cope about Pachamama. Like it was so incredibly scandalous for someone who was already slightly uncomfortable at this point, working on trying to accept sacred imagery, to now seeing people, whether or not you think it was Our Lady or not, doing this weird style, dance around this wooden figure and bowing down.
It was not Our Lady, and I'm not going to pretend it was.
Yeah, no, I mean, like they can say, oh, well, the presenter says that it's Our Lady, but I'm just like, look, man, this is highly, highly scandalous. Also, it doesn't make sense that it's, they say it's, it's for the Amazon, like Our Lady of the Amazon, when the statue comes from like Peruvian origins. Yeah. So it doesn't make sense. But yeah, it was highly scandalous. But then whenever I came into the church, the way I started to have to deal with this is that I had to kind of do a very serious and intellectual study of the crisis. And I don't think that there are a lot of good, full, consistent studies out there on the subject of the history of the crisis and also how you deal with these things. Because to be honest, when I look through the comment sections of videos that have to do with, either the latest dust ups in Rome about something or about the crisis in general, I do seem to see one of two things for the most part. Either traditionalists either rightly being upset and or giving, in my opinion, very weak arguments for traditionalism. And then I also see on the other end of it, either very weak arguments in support of what's going on, just being like, well, if the Pope said it, it's good enough for me. Or these like highly elongated 3-hour long videos trying to justify a 5-worded sentence or something. And it's like I told one of my friends who was interested in making some Catholic YouTube, I said, a lot of Catholic YouTube has devolved down into being the personal lawyers of Pope Francis. Like it has kind of gotten ridiculous. But how I dealt with it was through intellectual study. And so I think that the best way to deal with things is to really sit down and say, okay, everything that, every effect has a cause, and the effect right now in this crisis is absolutely insane. And and every cause is going to be greater than the effect. So what's the cause? And I think when you look at, for instance, the studies that the SSPX has done with their crisis series or other books that they've even just put out about that, I think you're going to get at least a good timeline of how you see Christendom being under attack in seed form from the beginning, but then it really blowing up philosophically with nominalism, Occam's nominalism, and then Occam's nominalism being propelled into religion when it comes to Martin Luther's Protestantism, and then being politically applied in secular liberalism, and then the response of secular liberalism morphs into modernism, and then into a neo-modernism, which is what we're kind of dealing with now. So the way I see it is I trust that Christ is in charge, because when I recognize how the church has always interpreted those famous lines from Matthew chapter 16 about thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. When you actually look at how does the church even understand this? The theologians, being like the class of scholastics from the year 1200 to 1700, are basically all in agreement when they say what this means is that the entire See of Rome and the entire church, right, will not be overcome with heresy 110%. But this does not mean that heresy might not come from the highest places. It does not mean that there is going to be a vast majority of Catholics who believe in a heresy. And so they balance this out. So I trust that our Lord will deal with it. And I think that people who are serious about understanding the cause of this, when they go and look up good sources, they'll be able to come to the similar conclusions and be at least somewhat, satisfied or satiated in their emotions in their mind.
I was just going to add that along those lines about coming into the church during crisis, because I came in 2018, right? He is.
No, listen, Nick, I'm not even kidding. I love hearing you talk. Like, I am riveted by everything you say, man. I really enjoy everything that you say. It's so awesome. Go ahead, Jason. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say. So during the time coming in during the crisis, because in 2018 there was another big sex scandal, and I remember sitting around RCIA and several people crying about the thing, struggling. Should I stay in the program? Should I not? So I actually looked towards the Old Testament for my comfort in the crisis, because in the Old Testament you see the nation of Israel, you see the Israelites go up, and then they crash because of their unfaithfulness, of their spiritual adultery, of all these things, doing horrible things. And they had kings and other leaders who were just horrible people all around, worse than anything we've ever seen, right? Yeah. Horrible people. But they never ceased to be God's people in the Old Testament. The Israelites were always God's people, no matter how horrible the leadership was. So I looked at that today in the church, and I say, regardless of how bad things get, if I stay within the bosom of Christ, within his church, I will be God, a son of God. I will be with the people of God. And ultimately Jesus in his time is his church. If there is a problem, which I'm not, which I believe there is, but Jesus will take care of it in his time. So while these topics should be discussed and be debated, and we should be fighting for truth, at the same time, I feel like sometimes we might overwhelm ourselves so much trying to be in control, because ultimately our worry, as Jesus even says in the Gospels, our worry isn't going to change anything. When God's timing, who is perfect, decides it is time to right this ship, it will happen, regardless of how much worry worry that I do. So I just looked to the Old Testament and said, I just want to be an Orthodox Catholic who is living the faith the best I can, and God in his timing will sort everything out.
That's funny you say that, because that is a very similar view to mine. And especially when you see, really understanding that the story of Judas is so baked into the whole story of salvation history from the beginning. And it starts with Cain and Abel, where Cain kills Abel. And it runs through when Joseph gets sold by his brothers, and then you have Christ's brother betray him and sell him in for 30 pieces of silver. The story of Judas is so baked into the story that it's 100% by looking to the past and seeing it through typology, you can see that this has happened many times through salvation history, and we're just in a time of unfaithfulness. And I think everybody really does just need to stay within the ark and just trust, just like Jason said, trust that God will handle things in his time. Now, going from this, I want to jump off. Jason, do you think we can pull the video up of the kid in the church?
Yeah.
Because we have an update.
Yeah. I'll pull that up. But can I just add one thing real quick?
Yeah, of course.
I saw a comment. I don't know if you've seen it up here. A lady called Shelly Anderson. Her name is Shelly Anderson, and she says that she's not Catholic, but she feels a really strong pull to be in the church lately. So I was just going to say, scroll up. I was just going to say, everybody say a prayer for Shelly.
Oh, let me.
Yeah, she's in the chat here. Yeah, scroll up.
Let's see.
While you're looking for that, I did want to me, it's a funny story. So I told y'all how in the Churches of Christ it's a cappella, right? First time we went to the Catholic church with the kids, they played the organ. And when they hit that organ, my son, who was not used to instruments, he literally whipped his head up and looked back. And he was like 4 years old at the time or whatever. But it was such a foreign thing to him at 4 years old that he was in shock more than I think we were that there was an instrument in church.
That's cool.
Shelly, this is so funny. I'm curious how Shelly found our show. I'm very curious. So she's a Methodist. So I'm very close to converting. I was raised Methodist, but have had a feeling I needed to convert, but just didn't. The past 6 months, the calling has been very strong. So, yeah, everybody pray for Shelly, that's for sure. But, Jason, you wanted to actually say a prayer for her? Or did you just want to mention it?
Say it again? No, I was just going to say just everybody pray for her. I think that's cool.
Okay. I thought you wanted to actually read a prayer.
She's no. She's listening in and all that to this show. I do remember during my conversion about praying. I don't know if you necessarily had this same thought, Nick. Are you single?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Because so when I was converting in, it was me, my wife, and 4 kids, right? So it wasn't just me that was converting. So I remember praying to God multiple times, if I am wrong, don't let me, if I damn myself to hell by leaving the true church and becoming Catholic, don't let me lead my family into damnation. I remember praying that, like, okay, if I lead myself, don't let me lead my family, because it was, I remember that was probably one of the scariest parts, is leading your kids and your wife to, eternal damnation because you are wrong on what you believe, right?
Well, I'll tell you, like, so Nick mentioned his parents, right? And now how his mom will actually consider going to adoration. Like, my in-laws, every time I see this, so before we go see anytime we're going to go see my wife's family, my wife and my kids are like, Dad, please don't preach today. But it's like, I can't help it. First off, and the last time I saw them on Mother's Day, scripture came up, and I told them, I started talking to them about scripture and just started telling them how just how Jesus is the new Moses, and I started showing them some of these things from scripture, showing how the story of Mary is prefigured in Eve, and that why Jesus calls her woman is because Adam calls Eve woman. All these things I go through, like, this whole thing. As they're leaving, my wife's grandmother, who's a Lutheran, she's the matriarch Lutheran of the family, pulls my wife aside and she goes, Nicole, I'm so proud of Anthony. I really think that he should be doing something with the kids. He just knows his Bible so well, and he's just so smart. I'm dying laughing listening to it, because my kids and my wife are like, don't preach. But it's like, I got my in-laws to come to a Latin mass. Like, they came to their first Latin mass in Manhattan, and they were like it is, it's like, if we don't at least share a little bit here and there, like, you never know what people are going to pick up on. You have to always, every chance you get, say something. Nick, I'm really going to be praying for your parents, man. I think that's pretty awesome that your mom's actually, because I think anyone that's exposed to adoration, I think they're going to eventually end up coming in.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So it's funny because I have the opposite effect, right? With my family, I used to, at dinners and get-togethers, they would always ask me to lead prayers. I haven't been asked to lead a prayer in 5 years.
Yeah.
But you want me to pull up this video? I've got it right here.
Yeah. Let's pull the video up, and so for anybody that didn't see this Protestant kid who decided he was going to go into a Catholic church in Texas, right?
Yeah, I think it was in Houston somewhere.
Yeah, it's actually here in Houston downtown. Is it Sharon?
Okay, here we go. All right, let's see. Can you make it bigger, Jason? You click
This
on
is
it?
heresy.
Yeah.
The rosary is heresy. Mother Mary is nothing. It's about knowing Jesus Christ. I'm telling you, you cannot exalt Mary. You cannot exalt Mary. You can't exalt Mary.
Run from Catholicism. The rosary, and Jesus tells us to sway away from repetitive prayer. This is real. And the real great now is the churches with this religion and this churchianity, and they're not even going to the biblical way of doing it.
So there's this funny thing in Protestantism where they say Jesus came to abolish religion. Right? It's a common trope you hear. Jesus came to abolish religion, which is such a preposterous thing. I'm curious how you guys think it would be handled if that happened in your parish, because this guy, he's smart. He went into a daily mass. It's a bunch of old people there. He was very smart the way he went about it. He knew, let me go on a Wednesday afternoon, because if I go on a Sunday, the place is going to be packed. How do you think your parish would handle this if it was on a Sunday mass and with the people that go to your traditional Latin mass parish?
Yeah, that's so. Well, at least it speaks from how I think they would react. He'd be out there really, really quick. So all of the ushers are very, very young. Fathers of 10 plus kids. All packing underneath the suits.
Yeah.
And so
what state do you live in?
Texas. Yeah, great state of Texas.
Oh, wow, that's great.
You live in the hill country, don't you?
Yeah, we live in the hill country. So it's I go to mass in Austin. So Socialist Republic of Austin,
I do not envy you going to Austin. Oh.
Austin, there's a reason that Austin fell from like in the top 5 to the top 40. I won't go too much of a tangent, but let's just put it this way. It's trying its best to become San Francisco in both policies and feces on the sidewalk. And so, yeah, it's bad. But he'd be hauled out pretty quick. This idea that like Christ came to abolish religion, I think is one of the dumbest theological assertions that has ever been proposed.
Yeah.
Because aside from the fact that it essentially is giving way to atheistic opinions in and of itself, the question it begs, what is religion? I remember hearing that statement it's not a religion, it's a relationship. I remember hearing that all the time growing up. But I always had this question, even as a young man. What do you define as religion? What is religion? Well, because when you go to scripture, right? Jason probably knows this. James chapter 1, verse 26 and 27 talk about pure religion before God the Father and our Lord Jesus Christ is this: to visit the orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. I think the reason that a lot of people hate the word religion is because they actually don't want to keep themselves unspotted from the world. They're just not being honest. But when we look at what is religion, there's a lot of different definitions. I won't try to bore you with my wannabe professorness, but
no, bore us. I love hearing this.
So like there's Cicero's definition of religion. There's Augustine's definition of religion. So Cicero said that basically religion is whenever a person is like rereading sacred texts all the time. That's what makes him religious. Augustine says that like what makes man religious is you bind yourself to God, right? And then St. Thomas Aquinas, I think it's in the second part of the second part, question 82, 83, somewhere in there. St. Thomas covers the virtue and the subject of religion. And he says that first off, religion, objectively speaking, is going to be, you could say, sure, it's rereading sacred texts, but it's actually going to be binding oneself and by God's grace orienting yourself towards the beatific vision. So having the charity of God through sanctifying grace in the soul and living out a life of virtue and letting grace heal nature through frequent reception of the sacraments. But the virtue of religion, which is the subjective portion of religion, is actually going to be a habit. It's going to be a virtue in which man renders to God the justice that we owe him as being subordinate creatures who are created by him. And this is chiefly done through the action of sacrifice, the highest action being the sacrifice of the Mass. So when people say it's not a religion, it's a relationship, I say no. Only through religion can you have a relationship, because only through virtue, through right ordered living, through holiness, and ultimately through the death of Christ being the highest action of religion, and through objectively binding yourself to God, can you have a relationship? God is a personal being, so of course we have to have a relationship with him. You can't have a God technically and it not be a personal being, philosophically. So we bind ourselves to him, and he is our end, he is our all. And so I think what most people mean by this is they don't want a God of rules, and they want a God that's going to, and they may not say it this way, but this is what they people know this is what they mean deep down. They want a God that they can fashion in their own image.
In their own image.
Buddy. You hear this in statements like, and I hate to say this, but like, Jesus is my homeboy, things like that. You hear these very blasphemous statements where they lower the deity of our Lord. They make him nothing more than a...
Oh, Nick, I'm so sorry. I hit that on accident. I'm so sorry.
You're
They
good.
lower you left off. They lower the deity of our Lord and make him our homeboy. Yeah.
They make him nothing more than a common man, or they make him like a butler or like a bellboy. I will pray to this being when I want something. And you see how this is manifested in, on the one hand, the prosperity gospel movement, where all religion is I give money, God gives me material things. It's not about my incorporeal, immaterial soul being healed by the nature of God, but it's my physical, corporeal being that's wounded by sin is now being gratified by physical pleasures. It's so satanic. It's so evil. It's so wicked. And when we really think about it, that's what it means. And so when a young man goes into a church and says, it's not about religion, it's about relationship, or these blasphemous things about Our Lady saying, this is, what do you call it? Vain prayer.
Our Lady is
vain
nothing
repetitions,
and repetitive, repetitive prayer.
And
vain repetitions is different from even repetitive prayer, because just break down what the sentence means. Vain repetitions. So vain meaning there's no end, or you could say even rooted in vanity. So you're trying to attract attention to yourself, and then you're repeating these things. This goes to what the Pharisees were doing when they were in the streets trying to appear religious in front of other people in the context of holy, and they're just repeating these things to make themselves look good. This is not humbling oneself and entrusting yourself to whom our Lord entrusted his disciple to, the beloved disciple to at the cross, and saying, pray to her, meditate on these mysteries of my life, of my death, of my resurrection, and of my future coming. And so I think he's just deceived in so many ways. It's very sad.
Well, see, I also think this rejection of the idea of religion, like they use it, is also, if I'm using the right word, antithetical to humbleness, right? Because I always just view it as you say this because you feel like there's no accountability, right? There's no accountability for my actions and what I do outside of what I believe my personal relationship with Jesus is. But I don't see how anybody can read the scriptures and actually believe that Jesus was against religion. Because if he was against religion, he would not have practiced the Jewish religion. He would not have set forth, the Last Supper, the ritual of that. And then if you understand how divine inspiration works, yes, through St. Paul, St. Peter, Jesus may not, because, you also hear people say, well, Jesus didn't say that. But if you understand how divine inspiration works, the Holy Spirit, which is the Godhead is a Trinity. They're all, on the same, the same wavelength there. It is essentially God through the Holy Spirit, Jesus in agreement, teaching these things through St. Paul, through St. Peter, and they are setting up churches. I mean, you cannot deny that they were setting up churches, not some mythical invisible church where, oh, I have a personal relationship there, I'm part of the church.
I think they would see those as separate churches, but really it comes to a fundamental misunderstanding of the covenantal structure of how God reveals himself in the Old Testament. So nowhere does Jesus say, I have come to abolish the covenantal structure of the people of God. God literally makes covenants with his people throughout salvation.
Well, he says, I came to fulfill, not destroy, too. What is he?
But he makes the final covenant is the covenant in his blood. Now, I think also, Nick, what they're saying when they say God came to abolish religion is they think our sacraments in the Catholic Church are the same as the old works of the old law. So even when Paul is talking about works won't save you, Paul's not talking about works of love. He's not talking about works of kindness and things like that. He's talking about circumcision.
Yeah,
well, no, the Dead Sea Scrolls actually reveal more into this works of the law. So Dr. John Bergsma, he has a book about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he writes in that book that outside of St. Paul and anywhere in ancient literature, you will not find. You can Google it, but you will not find works of the law anywhere outside St. Paul in the ancient literature, ancient world. They discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, and guess what they found? They found the phrase works of the law. And do you know what works of the law referred to in the Dead Sea Scrolls? Like you're saying, these ritual hand cleanings, these ritual, I've got to purify my vessels and all that. Nowhere did works of the law in the Dead Sea Scrolls refer to, say, almsgiving or good works and good deeds and living. What's that?
Yeah.
Not like murdering someone. These like the
exactly.
Yeah.
So what we find through the Dead Sea Scrolls is that Paul is probably referencing these works of the laws that the Dead Sea Scrolls that the Essenes were writing about, right? So the Catholic Church once again was vindicated in its teaching on works of the law, whereas the generic Protestant version was shown to be made up. Really.
Yeah, when they say that, when they're talking about religion, they're talking about the structural church, the Catholic structural church, and they're saying that Jesus came to abolish that, but that's not at all what he came to do. He actually came and founded a church, and he gave us a new covenant with new sacraments that all mean something. So now the diocese actually put out a statement about this, and Jason has the statement. So, Jason, why don't you pull it up? So the diocese actually gave the priest a heads up on how to handle this. And, real quick, though. So Nick was saying that he would be removed real quick, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think I would swing at him. Like, I feel like I know we're supposed to turn the other cheek, and I feel like I know we're supposed to love our enemies. But at the same time, there comes a point where it's like, you do not come into a Catholic mass during our highest point of sacrifice and liturgy and insult my mother. And I don't know if the line of, I mean, I would confess it after, but I think my emotions would be running so high that I might take a swing at him over that. I mean, you do not, I don't know if it's the Italian in me. It's like, you're not talking about my mother, bro. Like,
you would at least get more physical besides a push.
Yeah, I would hurt him, I think.
Yeah, I would at least grab the shirt, you know?
It's a good question, because it's like with someone, you know, it's so interesting after becoming Catholic to see how your emotions really do change about the subject of Mary. Because, like, I mean, even just hearing myself of what I used to say, just being like, you know, Mary was a sinful woman, but she was amazing. Like, that sounds so bad to me. So incredibly blasphemous. And it obviously is. But I just like, how could I say such a thing? But for I mean, those people, they actually believe that is the case. They'll say, you know, like, what's so special about her, you know? And so I do think it, you know, it probably comes down to like, what is your intention? Because, you know, again, with moral theology, you have to ask questions like, you know, is the action in and of itself good or bad, or is it indifferent? Does it have a good or bad outcome? Does it, what is your intentions? What is your intellect like knowing at this moment? I think you can make a good case that it's like, yeah, I mean, if this person is coming into the context of the holy sacrifice of the Mass and he's spewing forth blasphemies, especially about, you know, God's highest created being Our Lady, then I think that I think you could make a good case of saying,
it's like,
you're gonna get rid of this.
It's like people even think the rosary. So I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and it's like, people think the rosary is just about, like, and it's a very nice thought. It's like, oh, we're meditating on the mysteries of the life of Christ through the eyes of Mary. Yes, it is that. It's also about having a relationship with Mary, though. And what happens is you fall in love with her as your own mother when you pray the rosary, and you actually are spending time with her. And it's like you really do fall deeply in love with her, to the point where on a filial level, I love Mary as much as I love Jesus. I know Jesus is my Lord and Savior, and I know Mary is not. But I don't love, it's like being asked to choose which one of my parents I love more. I love them both on an equal level. Like, I have more of a fraternal love for Mary, because I really do see her as, I mean, I've been praying that Hail Mary since I'm a child, you know? So it's like, I think as a convert, it might be a harder thing for you guys to grasp that too. But it's like, the Hail Mary has always been, whenever it's like that end of the Hail Mary where it's like, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death, has just always been something where anytime I've been in trouble in my life, I remember driving in and getting in a car accident, and as the car was coming, getting a Hail Mary in before the accident hit, you know? And it's like, if there's something so, like, I would take such deep offense that if somebody insulted Mary to me, that especially in the context of the Mass, somebody came in saying that, I don't know if I would be able to control myself and not take a swing. And it leads into the other story of what they're doing at Dodger Stadium, right?
I just wanted to add, Anthony, that I wouldn't, even in my Protestant days, I would never think of Mary as nothing. Now, I may not have venerated her or held her in the respect that I had, but knowing Scripture itself, I don't know how any Protestant in good faith can say Mary is nothing, right? And ultimately, when you think about the Protestant understanding of Mary, and this is what I believe, I think the understanding is actually quite disgusting, because ultimately you're saying that God used this young woman as a vessel and then just discarded her like she was nothing once he achieved his purpose. It's really quite disgusting. And this guy, this Rick Foley or whatever his name is, he really reiterated that point when he says Mary is nothing. So he views God that basically he used and abused her and tossed her to the side. And it's quite horrible when you think about it.
Well, Richard says, what would Mary want you to do in that case? So I heard a lot of people saying, this is a wonderful teaching moment. You guys could have catechized him. And it's like, no, I don't think you could have. But I think if I knocked it. I think if I knocked his teeth out, that would have been a good catechetical lesson. Like, don't come back into a Catholic church and talk about our mother.
No,
like
you
that.
also
like,
have to know your you also have to know your audience. He did not come in with a heart to open dialogue, right?
No.
And Jesus says, "Don't cast your pearl before swine."
Right. So I don't think I would have tried to dialogue.
No, he was not interested in dialogue.
And I think I could have taught him a lesson. Like, this is a line you don't cross with Catholics. And it also goes to this thing that's going on with the LA Dodgers, where they're allowing these disgusting mockery of Catholic nuns who have literally changed the face of the earth through their between their prayer and their, you're talking about contemplative nuns have literally led God's spirit across the face of the earth like you couldn't imagine. And then just their works of charity and the corporal works of mercy to go in and have these disgusting men dress up with their face painted like demons and call themselves the Sisters Perpetual Indulgence. Like, it's an appropriate name because they are overindulging themselves, but it is such a mockery. Like, it's making me angry that Catholics are not doing anything about these things at this point. I live in New York, and I am so mad at myself that I did not go to that St. Paul's Church in Manhattan when that God is Trans exhibit happened. Like, I'm really angry at myself that I did not go there and rip those paintings down. And Cardinal Dolan just made them take the sign down and let them keep the paintings up. And it's really been going over. Like, I even talked to Jason about it the other day. I'm like, I really feel like I'm a coward for not doing something about that.
Man, well, yeah. I was actually thinking about this today. You're talking about the great things that the sisters have done for us. A while back, me and Mark interviewed a sister from the congregation of the Benedictines of Mary, Sister Mary Joseph. And I remember the biggest takeaway I had from that, listening to this sister talk, she just piety, holiness just poured from this woman. And it was like, and I remember thinking, and I was thinking about it today before the show, no matter how horrible we are as laity, and that, people make excuses. Well, I'm not going to be Catholic because of so-and-so. Well, don't look at us. Look at how pious and holy these women are. And the fact that you're mocking them is actually quite infuriating because, like I said, I mean, you don't get better than most of these nuns.
Now, wasn't that nun from the same order as the incorruptible nun?
I believe so. I believe that's what Mark said. Yeah.
So, Nick, what do you think? Because Nick has actually been going to protest these drag events. Like, Nick has been doing this with the men you're doing it with the men from your parish, right?
Yeah, we have men from the diocesan TLM, a couple TLMs that are diocesan, and from the SSPX, all coming together, and even people from the Novus Ordo. It's like I said in my last video, we don't act like Catholic YouTube when we're protesting the devil. We don't throw crap at each other for minuscule reasons or try to expose each other. One thing that you said, Anthony, I appreciate so much, which is just, on the one hand, it's so infuriating, these things going on. But I think what is more infuriating is not seeing Catholics do something about it. Like, think about this. If you were to compare, right, the two largest monotheistic religions, right, Christianity and Islam, if there's a reason why leftists know that they can get away with picking on us and not with the other team. And the reason is because so many Catholics from these past several generations have let them do this. They have said, well, I don't like it. It offends me, but like, what can I do against it? Hollywood's such a big system, or the school system's so big. I can't, it's just me and my friends. I can't do anything about it. But then let's look at where we've gone. We went from, in just my short lifetime, 2014, homosexual quote unquote marriage is legalized, to, well, no, you must bake our wedding cakes, to, oh, well, you must respect my pronouns, oh, to, I want to take your children to a drag show, to now, no, I will teach your children what gender they are in schools.
And I will mock your faith in a way that, and you can do nothing. And
yeah. You want me to show you a way that I believe that the mocking is actually a positive affirmation of the Catholic faith? Because this was something else I was thinking during my conversion. Christ said that his people and his church would be persecuted, right? Because they first persecuted me. Name another Christian group that is more mocked, persecuted, so on and so forth than the Catholic Church.
Well, it's like the Satanists when they do a black mass, they mock Catholicism.
As horrible as it is, it can also
shows it's true.
Yeah,
it shows it's true. But Nick, how did you guys organize your event to go and protest that? Because I'm really I want to figure out how I could do this in New York, because this thing in New York is really upsetting me, and that nobody has done anything. I mean, I feel like if we would have protested it, maybe Cardinal Dolan would have put his foot down a little, but because he's getting all the pushback from the rainbow side and nothing from us.
Can I ask you a question real quick, Anthony, about New York and that trans exhibit? Real quick. It's not super serious, but I was thinking about this. Like I said, it's not serious at all. But do you think that if this had happened, say, in the 1940s or 1950s, 1930s, when the mob in New York was pretty hardcore, right? I guess. Do you think they would have allowed something like this? And if they wouldn't, what about today? Because I was thinking, a lot of the mobsters are quote unquote. Are you telling
me I should go make some phone calls to family members? Because I might have to.
Potentially, but I was thinking about that today. I was like, I wonder if the mob would have. But
I'm more curious how Nick actually, how those guys actually figured out how to organize like that. Like, what did you guys do to get people together?
Yeah, so on the one hand, it's an absolute travesty when bishops aren't doing anything about this. I listened to today that interview that Matt Fradd had with I'm blanking
Calvin
on
Robinson.
Calvin Robinson, thank you. And when Calvin Robinson told about how I related so much with Calvin Robinson, because he said when he got asked to do that debate at Oxford, I felt so much like him, because I thought, who am I? There's so many more qualified men to debate for our Lord. But there's literally no one else doing it, and I feel I must say something, or else I will die. Right? It's kind of it's like a David moment almost. It's just who is this giant blaspheming the name of the Lord? And so how I felt in this situation was, I don't see anything going on. Calvin Robinson said he emailed or called every single Catholic bishop in the United Kingdom, and none of them came. None of them came, and that's something that, according to 1 Timothy chapter 3, as well as Titus chapter 2, a bishop is supposed to lead his flock into all correct doctrine. And so by just not saying anything or just asking, well, can you take a sign down? That's not being a good shepherd. So what we did was, and I'll give you guys the practicals, because it's really not that hard. It's really not that hard. What we did was we saw there was a drag show that was coming to one of our small Texas towns near where I live, New Braunfels, Texas. And it was being hosted by this Protestant sect. It's the United Church of Christ. It's not Jason's group. This is Obama's denomination, right? And this drag show was, quote, family friendly, whatever that means.
There's no such thing. Yeah.
There is no such thing. And it was, what's interesting is that it was particularly Satan themed. Right now, it's satanic in and of itself, but it was Satan themed. So, you had transgenders dress up as the devil, have pentagrams, inverted crosses, and they were literally dancing on an image of the crucifix. That's what they were doing. And this is in a quote church. This is one thing I even told, shout out to Mr. Tim Flanders, right? Great guy that he is. I told him, I said, even if you guys are really on the ecumenical train, right, which I'm not, but even if you guys are, Protestantism is so different than it was in the 60s that it just doesn't even matter. And so what we did was we said, no, we're not gonna have this, because what leftists want to do is they want to do two things. One, they want to gaslight people on the right, broadly speaking, into thinking that you're the only one, and that you're going to lose the culture war, and that it's all over, just a matter of time, And then two, they want to penetrate small town America, because in small town America, we're not as affected for the most part as quickly as the big cities are. But they know if we can. Yeah, it's if we can strike the deep south, if we can break into the heart of the deep south, then we can win. And so we knew this. And so what we did was I said, okay, I called some friends and I said, look, I'm not seeing any parishes talk about this. Maybe they know about it. Maybe they don't know about it. But let's organize and let's do something about it. So step number one, if you guys want to do something like this, first off, I recommend just find five guys that you're friends with, and then say, okay, let's go and protest this. All you five guys, this is what I want you to do. I want each one of you to call five other guys, right? And I want you to get as many guys as you guys can down here. Then what I want you guys to do is I want you to bring flags with you, and Christian flags. I want you to bring signs that say stuff like, Christ is King, or perversity is not diversity, or, you know, in our case, like Texans believe in moral values, things like that. Bring a bullhorn and protest as close as you can to the event, right? Know your rights, so know where to go and where not to go, right? You don't want to go storming into their building per se, but know where to go and where not to go, and do that. And then what you can also do is social media is the printing press, right? So what we did was we just went online, found their advertisements, and we sent them to some of these like conservative groups in Texas that mainly focus on fighting against the perversities in schools and these drag events. And so what they did is they posted it up. So our event, our Catholic event, we ended up getting about 40 to 50 people. The groups, though, that came in total were about 300 people from around.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, 300 people. And they were from all over the state. And what was amazing is that after that, like I think it was 2 weeks later, you guys might have seen on my last video, Satanists show up, right? The quote Church of Satan shows up in San Marcos, Texas, right? Literally like 20 minutes up from New Braunfels. Yeah. And what they're going to do is they're going to do a satanic invocation, right? Calling upon the devil in a mock sense, right? They're mainly trying to mock Christians. And what we decided to do is I was like, well, we're not going to tolerate it, right? Evil does not have the right. Like we in this American framework have been gaslit and brainwashed into thinking that what rights mean is it just means as long as you're not hurting anyone, you have a quote right or legal allowance to do X. But that begs the question, where do rights come from? If you say society, then you obviously cannot say like Mustache Man did anything wrong or Che Guevara did anything wrong or anything like that. It has to come from the first cause, the uncreated one, right, from God.
Yeah, and in the Constitution, what does it say? We hold these rights to be self-evident that all men are created equal by their creator, right? So we believe that these rights come from God.
Yeah, exactly. So when we show up, what we did was it ended up being us. The TFP came out, America Needs Fatima. TFP, for those of you guys who don't know, Tradition Family Property, great organization. And I saw Catholics from all around. Now, this is what was interesting. The city hall was less than 100 feet from the Catholic Church, right? The local Catholic church in town. And we had, you know, SSPX people show up. We had diocesan TLMs. We had Nova Sordo people show up. The priest wouldn't show up. The priest wouldn't show up. The priest, though, that did show up, right, all the way far away, and he's very sympathetic to tradition, right? He's not a traditionalist priest, but he comes. And so what we did was that we surrounded the building. We prayed all 15 mysteries. We prayed the 7 penitential psalms. We even prayed, I think it's called the devotion to the Holy Face, where you're specifically praying imprecatory prayers. So we were praying imprecatory prayers toward the devil. A friend of mine, he brought a bunch of relics. So we took a relic of the stone of St. Michael the Archangel. The priest blessed the building. We took a relic.
God bless that priest that came.
Yeah, it was amazing. We had a relic that had touched a relic of the Holy Cross and of the Holy Lance. And when the Satanists came out of the building and we like held these things up, they literally fled. They just fled. And so when the protest was over, I counted, there was probably about 400 of us in total, right? Mostly Catholics, about 99% Catholic. There were a few Baptists that showed up. So I guess shout out to the few Baptists that decided to show up. And what ended up happening is that we blessed the building with holy water. We put blessed salts in all 4 corners of the building. And there was only 2 counter protesters the whole time. And I said this yesterday on the Meaning of Catholic morning show, but it was funny because one of the protesters, I think, was trying to make a sign that said, honk if you love Satan, trying to mock our sign that said honk if you love God. But they misspelled Satan and they ended up spelling honk if you love Santa. Which is funny. And so we went over to try to witness to them, and they ended up fleeing, just shouting, you know, we hate men. And we were like, well, I thought you were empowered women, like, you know, but yeah, no, they fled. And so basic point of what I'm saying is it's very easy to organize. Contact your friends, right? Make posters, put them around your parish, right? Or around other parishes that you think are sympathetic. So it's like, I don't know everything about New York, but here's what I do. So Anthony, you got a diocesan TLM and you got an SSPX chapel.
Yeah, we have two diocesan TLMs and SSPX, and then we have one of the greatest diocesan Latin Mass parishes in the world, which is in New York City. And I am in on every one of these parishes. I know people at every one of these parishes. I know all the priests at these parishes. I'm figuring something out, and I am going to do this.
Do that. What you do is what we did is we contacted the priests, and so with the traditional priests that they went along with us. Full stock and barrel. They just put it out on messaging websites like FlockMe and things like that. So the whole congregation knew. And so we had, dozens and dozens of people showing up. So just do stuff like that. Definitely bring flags. Definitely think about, like, if you're going to lead it, what you guys want to do. So definitely pray the rosary. Think of some good chants like Christ is King. Think of some good signs that you can carry. But then when you're done with all these things, write your bishops, maybe if this is in the context of a parish, complain to the priest and use scripture and be like, this is what your job is. And we come to you in fraternal as sons, right? In filial charity towards you. Your
be
job,
our fathers.
Yeah, you are supposed to be our fathers. You would not want us, I would hope anyway, as physical fathers. I'm not one, but as a physical father, bringing in wickedness into our homes. You would hopefully chastise us for bringing in, impure videos or impure images or whatever into our homes. You are bringing this into the temple of God. This is like the Old Testament bringing a statue of Baal into the temple of God and saying, we endorse this, right? Or if I'll put the Baal statue here. I just won't say anything about it. But whatever, we'll just see what happens from this. Like, it's insane. So do something about this, and you'll get it done.
Nick, I can't even tell you how excited I was to watch your videos on your channel, guys. If you're not subscribed to Traditional Thomas, go over there. He has a whole video of this event. It's really an amazing video to watch, and you just see all these men come together, and it's like I really that video convicted me so much that why have I not made any effort in my diocese with some of the filth that goes on in New York? And I really am I'm going to take that as a cue to really, I have to, because I know so many good men at these parishes, and I know if somebody just takes the lead, all of them are looking to do the same things as I am. And it's like, and we even have a few priests. I know one or two priests that I think will jump at it and say, come on, let's do this, So I think we're even fortunate in that aspect.
One of the priests at our parish a few years ago, they had a black mass, and I remember he went out there and led prayer and the rosary and stuff right across the street from it. So yeah, I mean, there definitely are priests that are willing and brave enough to do these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what's needed.
We have to start doing stuff, guys. Like if you guys have a close knit parish, start talking to each other. We have to. I'm not saying get physically violent. I'm saying we need to start making our voices heard, because there's no meeker crowd than the Catholics, and they walk all over us, and we do nothing. We do nothing.
And vote. I'll say this real quick. I see so many trads, or just Catholics in general. They're so black-pilled about voting. And this is one thing I've been saying in my videos of late. That's exactly what leftists want. They want you to not vote. They want you to stay at home. What you guys need to do is be proactive and say, who are we going to put on our city council? Who are we going to put on the school board meetings? Conservatives, the normie right needs to wake up. And what they need to do is they need to realize so much of this change that we don't like that's taking place, we are literally allowing to happen. We're not protesting and we're not voting. And so get involved in your local scene. And then also, even with national politics, right? We got some pretty heavy hitters, right, coming up in this next election, right? I'm a huge political guy, right? We got Trump round number 3. We got a DeSantis looks like he's jumping in tomorrow. You guys may not like them. You might loathe them. But let's be honest. They're way better than anything else that we've been getting over the last 3 years, right? Yeah. I personally like both of those candidates. And so I'm like, look, go vote for them. Do something. The point is I just don't want to see Catholics acting like our father Adam, allowing the snake to come into the bride and just tell her all of these false stuff. And I'm just going to sit by and be like, I'm going to wait till the bride gives me the apple tea. And then, she was the one that you get. Basically, when the Lord returns, are we just going to turn around and point the finger at the church and be like, she was who you gave me, Lord? I don't know what to do.
Wow. That's wow. Oh, man. I tell you, man, it's really so. We're gonna have Joshua Charles on Thursday, and Joshua Charles, there's never been somebody who I had one conversation with, and I have devoured everything he's had. Then I had another so when you guys hear the conversation with Joshua Charles on Thursday, it's going to be a very deep theological conversation. We're going to get into a lot of the things that are going to explain a lot of the things going on in the church, a lot of the things that we even like touched on slightly on this episode, but really the Danielic mystery episodes that Rob and I did, we're going to go deeper into that because Joshua Charles is a really, really deep thinker, and I'm really excited to have him on. But it does touch on this, and he was Mike Pence's speechwriter during the Trump presidency. So he has so many, so many things about what you were saying about like rights and things like that, that like really cut deep to the issue about like freedom, like the freedom of speech is not what people think it really is. Like, you don't really have freedom of speech. And when Christians say that, they're not really thinking about the implications of that. Like, do you think you really have the freedom to commit blasphemy and say whatever you want? You don't. Like, that's not actually correct. Like, the Constitution may say, oh, we hold, we that this God-given right to freedom of speech. You don't have a God-given right to say whatever you want. So we're going to probably touch on some of that stuff with him too. We're going to wrap this one up. We always try to keep it at an hour and a half. I cannot believe how exciting this episode was. You both had such great conversion stories. Jason, I always love having you on. Nick, you blew my mind tonight, man. I'm like one of your biggest fans, man. I love that I got to have you on without the trivia setting and we got to actually have a real conversation. So we're definitely going to get you back on.
Let me speak for Rob real quick.
Go ahead.
So this misunderstanding of freedom, which people have fundamentally misunderstand what freedom actually is, right, today, but it's probably linked to the Masons and stuff at the founding of this country, which is why we have a misunderstanding of freedom of speech. I think Rob would say something like that. So let me fill in for Rob.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a truth to it. It's like, what do you mean by freedom of speech? Short answer is it's just Thomistically speaking, according to how the Catholic Church understands it, God only gives you the right to do that which is morally right. So when I say, like, when someone says, for instance, like, I have a right to speech, my question is, what do you mean by right? If what you mean by right is a moral allowance to do whatever you want, absolutely not. And Catholics would get on board with this, because if I was to say, do you have a right to lie? They would maybe be confused and say, well, what do you mean? Like, you don't have the right to tell falsehood. You have the ability to because of free will.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But you don't have the right to. And again, like, rephrase in the context of, say, abortion, right? Or homosexual acts. You should be like, well, do you have the right to those things? No, you have the ability because of free will. You should not do those things because you don't have a right to do those things. You only have the right to do that which is morally right. And
well, going back to Rick Foley, the guy that ran into Annunciation Church and was spouting blasphemies against Mary and stuff like that. It goes to what you're saying. Yeah, he had the ability, but he didn't have the right to say those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
There was one time Father Mitch Pacwa was debating. He was debating a couple of Protestants about Mary, and a Protestant was accusing Father Mitch Pacwa of blasphemy because he was saying, this is blasphemous. It's idol worship. And he kept saying things about Mary, and Father Mitch Pacwa snapped back. He goes, you better watch that. You're not guilty of blasphemy. Because like he was saying a little crazy stuff about Mary. And I never saw Father Mitch Pacwa get so angry like that. And I've loved him ever since he did that. Like, I really saw like he got angry and visceral about it. It's like, guys, she's our mother. We need to defend her. And she's Christ's mother too. So I don't know, I have such a deep love for Our Lady that like if somebody says the wrong thing about her in front of me, I don't know. I'm gonna have to beg the Lord's forgiveness for how I act.
Nick was just talking about people being black-pilled, and I'm not going to go into a whole spiel on that because I agree and disagree with Nick on that. But I did have this conversation similar to with my girls the other day, because I guess if I'm using the term right, I still not sure what red-pilled and blue-pilled, but picking on what you said, you said black-pilled, right? So
black-pilled means you're hopeless. Okay.
Okay. So
red-pilled. Red-pilled. I have my own opinion of what red pill is, but I think red pill is just, you understand that the narrative they're feeding you is nonsense, and what the media is telling you is total nonsense. Like, that's all red pill means. Black pill means you've lost all hope.
So I picked up, what black pill meant based on what Nick was saying there. I think I'm more black pilled on national elections. And I was kind of having that conversation with my girls, but at the end of the day, in our current structure in the U.S., yes, I agree with Nick in the local election, because that's where you hold your most power, right? As a voter in the local election, because it may be you versus 2,000 instead of you versus 10 million people, 100 million, or whatever, national level. Which brings up another point about why the election of senators should not be by popular vote, because you're taking away the power of the voter on a state and local level. So yeah, I am black pilled in a lot of ways on national level politics, but I do think that we as Catholics can enact the most change by getting involved with your local school.
Well, I think that's what Nick was
voting,
really saying.
Your city councils and stuff. Yeah, I'm agreeing.
Nick
with him
wasn't
in that
just
aspect.
saying vote in those. Nick was saying get the men in your parish to run for these offices, because we need to, like, men that think like us to actually run for these positions.
But it also needs to be the right temperament and right type of person, right? Because
I'm not it.
Outside of a very small percentage, most politicians are absolutely horrible people, and good people don't get involved in politics most of the time. Why? Because they're not willing to put their families through the scrutiny and the hatred that they will go through. So most politicians that are, especially on a national level, are all about self, and that's pretty self-evident in many ways. So if you are the right type of person, or somebody, I would say get involved at a small local level, but at a national level, it's going to be very hard to enact any meaningful change at a national level.
You used to be surprised, because, like, here's a good example. Roe v. Wade, right? It takes a long time, but it takes the right person at the right time to get a person in there to where it gets overturned. And so, on the one hand, I understand, and I
agree with you on there.
Yeah, because it's like, I agree with you. I think especially after 2020, a lot of people were just absolutely black pilled, and I understand. And I think it was to Lauren Kay, as long as you're Catholic pilled, that's the only pill you really need at the end of the day. But what we need to understand is this. There are so many statistics that if you really want to, and you can boil down and look into, to recognize that this next election is going to be very, very different. Because I'm not trying to get into election conspiracies or whether stuff has happened or not, but let's just put it this way. There's been some major defortification going on over the last couple of years. Yeah. And the reason, and I have literally zero authority or influence to say, like, who you should vote for, or, like, give my opinion. Like, maybe one person out there would be swayed by what I'm going to say. But I really do think that what we have potentially in 2024 is going to be a catastrophic or a amazing resurgence type of election. Here's the reason why. Either we're going to stay home, right, and just decide to do nothing, what good men have been doing for a long time in local elections and local issues like we've been talking about, and the forces of evil will triumph, or we can put candidates in there who can actually make a difference. And what I'm seeing in the GOP, what I'm very happy to see, is that I'm actually starting to see a more authentic strain of conservatism being infused back in there, but a style of conservatism which says we need to just burn these things down. So this is what I'll end with, at least on the politics level, so I don't bore you guys with. One of the main reasons why I'm actually really excited to see potentially if Trump was to get reelected is this one reason. In 2020, in October 2020, he signed an executive order called Schedule F, which essentially gives the president the power to fire any bureaucrat, any elected bureaucrat that he wants. Now, the great, wonderful Catholic president that we have now, right? He is a good Catholic. He rescinded that, like, one of the very first days that he was in office. But this is now top priority potentially for the Trump campaign. So whether you like Trump or not, like in the context of being on the right, Trump is now a bull in a china shop.
Oh, for sure.
And we have a dark.
I think he's the only candidate that would fire everyone because of what they did to him.
No, I agree. And that's why I'm like, that's why, like, on the one hand, while I like some of DeSantis's policies, I also have a lot of friends who are saying Marshall 2024, and I understand that to a degree. My main issue is I'm like, look, I try to be a little bit of a realist. As a Thomist, I'm a moderate realist, right? I want to see this system, right, get, and I'm going to use harsh language, but burned down, meaning I want to see the structures of the bureaucracy, which are the main issues, torn down by, even if he's not the best candidate. I saw some people in the chat saying, you know, why vote for the lesser of two evils? It's still evil. Evil by what standard? If it's by that standard, we would vote for nobody because we all have sin, right? The idea with this is that we need to put at least a candidate who can be a bull in a china shop in there, go in and wreck everything, like just completely demolish a lot of the problems that we've had and do something better. I'd at least like to vote for that and try to get behind that than just sit at home and say, well.
A little bit of hope is Arizona today, the legislature passed a law. They will no longer use electronic voting systems at all. So then Katie Hobbs tried to veto it. The legislature overrode her veto. So Arizona 2024 has paper ballots. These are the things you need to do. And that's why local elections have consequences way more than you can ever imagine. You get all these conservatives in on the local level and they can override the governor. So really don't think it's hopeless. And so I want to just tell everybody what the pills are. Red pilled just means you don't believe a thing out of the media and the narrative that they're feeding you. You know, everything's nonsense. The black pill is you're hopeless. And the white pill is you have hope. So those are the three pills. We got to be white pilled people that we have hope for the future, and be red pilled because you know everything's total nonsense and you're awake and you're not, you know, drowned out by the narrative of the Matrix. So it's the red pill and the white pill are the good ones. The black pill is hopelessness. But you have to. Oh, Jason,
so sorry, real quick. like I said, so I guess back in the day, you know, I was very involved in politics. I mean, I was very much into the Mises Institute, you know, the Austrian School of Economics. You know, I was very into libertarianism and all these things. And when I went to college, the only thing I found interesting was politics. So I said, well, I'm gonna get a political science degree, which, by the way, if anybody's thinking of doing that, it's a completely worthless degree. Don't waste your time or money. But I was very, very into it. But I guess the reason that I've been black pilled, and I'm not saying, and I agree with you that there was some good that came from the previous presidency. I'm not going to deny that some good happened, but when you look at the trajectory, right, on a national, and I'm talking about this on a national level here, we keep saying, well, we've got to vote for the person that most aligns with us, even if they don't align with our beliefs, they're closer to us. So we still got to do that. But the trajectory has been like this since I can remember. You know, I'm 41 years old, been like this. It may go like this and have a little up, but it's still like this. So I can see why people think, you know, black pilled, you know, myself included, because it's like on a national level,
2020 just messed us
nothing has changed. Even before 2020, like we're voting, we're doing the things that we say. And I've always been real big back in the day. If you don't vote, you can't complain. And it's like, why not? Like I voted and the exact opposite still happened. So I can complain whether I vote or not.
I think local elections are the way to go, guys. Local elections
if you're going to get involved, yes, definitely it has to be your local election, because those are, like you were saying, Anthony, those are going to be the people that are handling your election ballots, that are handling all these things that add up to a big thing. So I think people focus too much on national politics versus our local politics. I think that's one of the biggest problems in this country. And another reason, again, that you need to repeal what amendment is it that changed
let women vote? The 19th. We have to get rid of that. No, definitely. Yeah, 100%. I agree with you, Jason. Women should be voting. This is a great way to end the show.
What was it that changed it to the direct election of senators? Was it the 18th?
I don't know. I just want to get rid of the 19th. That's the only one I'm worried about.
Let's see.
And also, while we're at it, we should really take away women's right to drive. Women shouldn't be allowed to drive. They shouldn't be allowed to vote. These are real problems that our society is facing.
Let's be the Christian Saudi Arabia. It's fine.
I'm not saying that far. I'm just saying, listen, women are dangerous behind the wheel, and they're dangerous at election
and
machines.
They can't
These
ride
are very
horses.
real things. They can't ride horses. All right, I'm cutting you both off because I do have to go. My wife
One more
is going to
thing.
strangle me.
It was the 17th Amendment. 17th Amendment. There it is. There you go. Okay, there you go.
Yo, I had so much fun with both of you tonight, man. This whole show went so fast. Like, I really couldn't sit and talk with you guys for 3 hours, but I have to wake up in like 4 hours, and I don't know how I'm going to function tomorrow. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Please hit like, subscribe if you guys aren't subscribed yet. Go check out them. I didn't even talk about our locals or anything tonight. I don't care. This is a really fun show, man. If you guys, either of you want to cut,
he's making so much money on locals that he's not even worried about it.
Me and Rob haven't made. I think we made $80, and we haven't even gotten paid for it yet. But if you guys, either of you want to take segments of this and put them on your own channels, feel free. Take whatever you guys want. I think this is a really good conversation. So I would actually like it, both of you, if you just put the whole show on your channels, just to expose each other to each other's audience. That would be a good idea.
No.
So
I enjoyed it.
Thank you guys both for coming on.
the
What was that, Jason?
No, I was saying I appreciated Nick's discussion, and thanks for having me on.
Nick, you are brilliant, man. You are probably the most underrated thought leader or thinker out there, or whatever. So, guys, if you're not subscribed to Nick's channel or Jason's channel, go to Tradmen, go to Traditional Thomist, and check them out. And I'm gonna try to figure out how I'm supposed to actually do the outro here. Wait. We can't just do the outro. Wait, don't go nowhere, because first Jason told us something tonight.
I'm not gay no more. I am delivered. I don't like men no more. I said I like women.
And then this is my favorite.
Trapper made it happen again. Look at it, we got a fire department out here again. Cause they always going down somewhere. Cause all on crackheads over there. Cause I had an accident, man. I hurt my homeboy, man. My homeboy got to go to the hospital. Cause look at this shit, cuz we suing, cuz we suing, cuz we don't care, cuz.
This goes out to all you men out there who are inclined to submit yourself to the lowest faculties in the most pathetic manner. You effeminate man think you were created in order to consume endless amount of pleasure without any consequences? Put your damn video games and smartphones down and pick up something heavy. Do something arduous for once. Pray